All right. So first, for the sake of the video and the way that I'll cut it together, can you state your name and your occupation for me?
I'm Jake Owens, Director of Conservation at the Los Angeles Zoo, and I am a conservation biologist.
Awesome. So I don't have a huge amount of background on you. I know what you studied here and I know you got your PhD here, but
Mhm.
what did you do before pursuing the PhD? Did you go to a different school or were you at Drexel?
Yeah, so I went to a small undergrad in southern New Jersey called Stockton University now, and it was Stockton College when I went there. And it's very small. It's in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. It's a really particular habitat. It's a very large campus. Um, and are you hearing that on the back end? It's in my office.
Only a little bit, just like
Okay,
get in and out a tiny bit. It shouldn't
sorry.
be an issue.
Okay, I'll just start over. So before I went to Drexel, I had gotten my bachelor's of science at Stockton University, which is a really small um, undergrad in New Jersey, southern New Jersey, where I'm from. And it's in the Pine Barrens, and it's really beautiful. It's like 3,000-acre campus in the middle of the Pine Barrens, and there's snakes, and you have to walk across a lake every day to get to campus. And then when I finished there, I worked for about 2 years at a small nonprofit in New Jersey near the beach called the Wetlands Institute. And so it's kind of research, education, conservation, all in the salt marsh and at the beach. And then that let me travel a lot and get experience doing international field conservation and ecology. So I was in Australia and I was in Chile, and then I was looking for a grad position to move into. I knew I wanted to do a PhD, and I had a good field experience. I think I was kind of knew what I wanted to do, and I worked with turtles a lot, and so there's a lot of turtle work that had gone on at Drexel, and so had a couple conversations. I had a couple conversations with some faculty at Drexel, and during that time that I was there, I met Dr. Gail Hearn, and I handed her my resume, my CV, and she saw that I had a bunch of bird work and international work, and she said, "You don't want to study turtles in New Jersey." Can you hear that? Okay, they're doing like stuff out in my office. So I met Dr. Gail Hearn, and she looked at my CV and she said, "You don't want to study turtles in New Jersey. You want to study monkeys in Africa." And I had never been to Africa, but because I had this bird background, birds are like monkeys in terms of research, but they're just harder because they move faster and they fly around, and monkeys are bigger and easier to follow. So I talked with Dr. Hearn, and then about 3 weeks later, I was in Africa, and I stayed there. So that was in 2008, where I started my PhD. But I was there for about 7 months that year, um, on Bioko Island in Equatorial Guinea.
That's awesome. So how did you get interested in ecology in the first place? Like, is this something that goes all the way back to your childhood, or did that kind of come later in life?
No, I always was into the outdoors. I spent a lot of time outdoors with my family. Um, we hunted and fished when I was younger, and then I spent most of my time outside, chasing snakes around and getting dirty and going to the local pond and canoeing around, and so I had always done that. And then I went to undergrad thinking that I was going to go into pharmacy because I was like pretty good at chemistry, and I was like, oh, I want to go and make money. And that was the way in science that I thought maybe I could go, and but I didn't really know much of what was out there. And so it wasn't until my senior year of undergrad that I had a conservation biology course and an evolutionary mammalogy course, which was the hardest class I've ever taken. And that combination taught me, one, that there was so much more to learn about life. I learned about pangolins, an animal I'd never heard about, and that now they're one of my favorite species. Um, they're also one of the most endangered species. They're the most heavily trafficked mammal in the world. And so that combination of like knowing that there's so much more out there to learn, and that we need to do so much to preserve it, and that there are careers in it, really led me to the path of wanting to do conservation. And so I just started with an internship that led into a job, which led into a bunch of international field work, grad school, and then, you know, continued.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about your grad school experience, but is there, and it's fine if you feel like you've already answered this, but is there something that sticks in your mind as like your favorite experience or something that you learned that you really took with you and carried with you throughout your professional life afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, there's a few things that I learned during my PhD because we worked in a very remote part of a remote island off the west coast of Africa, the central west coast of Africa. And so, one, I made some of my closest friends. So, like the people I did my PhD with, we talk daily on WhatsApp, literally daily. We see each other still when we go to conferences. We're extremely close, and we support each other in life and in work and all that. And we really that started because we just live in the field, living in a tent, pooping in a hole next to them for months on end. Um, but so I think it's really like the kind of collaboration was the big thing. Like you can't do conservation, you can't really do field science without being collaborative, especially international work. And so much of my work now is international partnerships, building them, developing them, tracking them, and it's all about kind of friendships and identifying what you're good at, what you're not good at, and how do you make friends who can fill in that gap of what's not good. So I think that was probably the strongest thing. The other thing was that because I was working in West Africa, and there had been a history of people coming from the States or from Europe to work in Africa. There was kind of a legacy of people coming in, doing some work for a little bit, and then leaving, taking data and research, maybe getting a PhD for a student or something like that. And there wasn't a long-term leave behind. Like the benefit was nearly all one-sided. But the lab that I was in with Dr. Hearn and the Biogo Biodiversity Protection Program was not like that. And so I got to see um, and work with an organization that was really ingrained in the community and worked with the people there, had these long-term relationships. And so that was something that I really built. And so when I ended up doing my postdoc in China, the thing that I went there thinking was I need to work myself out of a job, which means I need to make sure every person that I'm working with over here has all the skills that I have brought to this project and the skills that they came in with, plus the local connection and local language and all that kind of stuff. So they're way better and more capable than I am by the time that I leave, and then I'm useless, and then I can leave and go do something else. So those were the two biggest things. I mean, the research side of things, you can study monkeys, study birds, all that kind of thing. That's all really easy to pick up. But the how to work and collaborate with people around the world effectively, that was probably the biggest lesson I learned.
So how did you get to where you are now? Like you mentioned that you did your postdoc in China. What did that involve and what came after that?
Yeah, so that was a really funny, weird situation. I was about a month, 2 months away from my defense. So this is 2013. I was defending in December, early December, and I got a call from Dr. James Spatilla, who was long-term professor who's since retired from Drexel. And he called me one day, and I was in the middle of writing, and um, the only two times he'd ever called me before were to pick his students up from JFK Airport, so like a 4-hour drive to go get them. So I was like, literally, I got on the phone ready to tell him off to say like, no, And then he said, hey, how's it going? You're finishing when? I said December. He said, okay, what are you doing after? I said, okay, I've got a couple postdocs that are of interest, but they need to be funded, so nothing in line yet. He said, do you want to go to China and start a reintroduction program for giant pandas? And I was like, whoa, yeah. So then I finished my PhD, I defended, and then I went back to Bioko in Africa for 2 months to do our expedition and teach a field course. And then I came back to the States for 9 days, and then I left for China, and I was there for 5.5 years. So that was really to help start a reintroduction program for giant pandas from the Chengdu Panda Base, which is where I worked. It's kind of like a zoo that has giant pandas and red pandas, and we're trying to come up with a protocol to get them out into the wild with the highest chance of success. And then that turned into a bunch of different stuff, a lot of other conservation work and nature reserve management, building a whole facility at the top of a mountain, um, reintroduction facility and research labs and living areas, and a lot of field training, all this kind of stuff. So it turned into a lot more than I initially went there for, but it was really super rewarding. I still work with them all the time, even though 3.5 years ago, I came back to the States for my position now, which is the Director of Conservation at the Los Angeles Zoo. So it was a weird kind of circuitous route, but that's pretty common in conservation, especially international work. But again, that was a huge learning lesson. And I'm still very close with all my colleagues there, and we still, work on papers. And then, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I wasn't able to get back, but I still run weekly lab meetings with my team over there, and I'm looking forward to get back once I can.
So, what drew you into this position?
So I was in China for 5.5 years, and I really did. We started from just me and really one other person who came on shortly after me, who was a young Chinese scientist called Xiaobi. And then we built this big team at the Panda Base with my colleagues there. And so there's 12 or 15 people now who have really good field skills, and they work with the pandas really well, and they could do everything, and they have their own research focuses. And so, like, the first 3 years I was in the field all the time. I was living in mountains and stuff. And then I started weaning myself out of the field and working with the pandas hands-on less and less. And then getting to the point where it's really just supervising and making sure everything's okay, coming when I had to come in. Um, and so I got to the point where I was mostly in the office, and I was like, well, I was doing conservation work, but I knew that if I had a different position that could focus on a lot of different things and a lot of different conservation issues and problems, then I could do more good. And so this position at the LA Zoo came up, and I got it, which was really, really great. And so I moved to Los Angeles. Yeah, that was in um, June of 2019. I moved here. And the great thing about the Los Angeles Zoo is that it had this awesome foundation of conservation. So the California Condor program, we joined that at the very start of the program in 1981. You know, hundreds of condors have been bred and released from the LA Zoo to go out. That's like an international story of conservation success that I've known about since I was a little kid. In China, it's very insular, so they might not know about a lot of different stories of conservation going on outside of China, but that was one of the ones that they knew about in terms of reintroduction. And so to be a part of a place that has this incredible history of conservation success, because we need those success stories to get out, was a real draw for me. The other thing was that they didn't have conservation division before me. They didn't have any specific like conservation focused staff at all. And so I'm the first director of conservation here. I was the first conservation specific staff who wasn't directly working with condors or another species like that. And so starting from a really good foundation, but building it into what I thought that it could be strategically, it was really exciting. I like that kind of space to work in. And so that's what we did. We built our first conservation strategic plan, launched that, and we have 6 different focal areas. And so we're building out all those focal areas, and a heavy focus on social environmental justice. So paid internship programs and a teen council for conservation, which is also paid, that we have here, from 30 kids from around Los Angeles getting engaged in conservation, especially individuals who are not often represented well in conservation, from Black and Brown communities, LGBTQ plus. So that's been really rewarding, but then a lot of also international work. We built a visitor center museum space in Baja for our Peninsula pronghorn conservation partners. I was just down in Argentina for a few weeks because we're getting started on some giant otter reintroduction work there. Probably headed to India in a couple months to build an incubation center for Indian gharials, which is the crocodilian species there. So yeah, it's been amazing. Now I've got all these partners all over the world who I work with all the time, new friends, and so it feels like my impact can be greater because I can kind of help fill in those gaps.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Just tons of experience. And you said that there are six focal areas that
Yeah.
you're working on. Do you feel it's worth mentioning what those are?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so our conservation strategic plan that we built it's totally focused on these six focal areas. It's social and environmental justice, California conservation, which is really important because the zoo, even though we've helped restore species like California condor and southern mountain yellow-legged frogs really close to Los Angeles, we didn't have any active engagement in Los Angeles. So habitat restoration work, species recovery work right here, a lot more engagement with local partners. Social environmental justice, California conservation, illegal wildlife trade. So the LA Zoo takes in a lot of animals from Fish and Wildlife Services from Port of LA because LA Port is actually one of the two worst ports in terms of importation of illegal wildlife parts and animals. So we get animals in all the time. We're already engaged in supporting enforcement agents. So we want to do more. So we've got a couple of different campaigns, one at the zoo to try to get people to think better about the purchases they make in terms of exotic pets. So not buying exotic pets that contribute to conservation risks, illegal trade, or that also hurt the animals and lower their welfare. And then another campaign that we're putting in next month at LAX with building partners with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Cal Fish and Wildlife, and others. And then we go into human wildlife coexistence. So a lot of the work, we have Asian elephants here, and we've supported Asian elephant conservation for a long time. And so getting more into that in Cambodia and Borneo, but also even right here in Los Angeles, constantly stories coming out. And if you look on Nextdoor, it's, I was chased by a coyote. I don't know what to do. So we're building messaging about how to exist with coyotes because we live in an urban wilderness kind of boundary and we need to promote those things, and we're a really good place to do it. And then the last two focal areas that we have, what did we already say? Oh yeah, yeah. So the last two are translocations. So it's the reintroduction work, and then evidence-based conservation. So it's research, conservation research. So social environmental justice, California conservation, illegal wildlife trade, human wildlife coexistence, conservation translocations, which is reintroductions, and then evidence-based conservation research.
Got it. That sounds very comprehensive.
Yeah, and it's great because I'm working to build the team now, um,
Yeah,
again from scratch. So it's really been rewarding.
yeah, that's super exciting. Um, so again, for the purposes of the video, this might sound like kind of a dumb question because you and I sort
I get
of
it. Yeah.
know why this work is important,
Yeah.
but can you talk about why this work is so important in today's world?
Mhm. Yeah. So um, it's conservation is a really hard thing to talk about sometimes because you don't want to be a bummer. We don't always want to be the source of negativity, but we are in the sixth mass extinction event to occur on Earth's history. So last time a mass extinction event occurred was when the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. And so, that's a really long time frame. And the last time that it happened was because of big rocks from outer space crashed into Earth. And now humans are having that similar impact where the rate of species loss is really high. And, you know, one, that's bad just in general for biodiversity. Like the thing that makes our planet special is the fact that we have lots and lots of living animals and plants and species all over the place. That's the biodiversity is what makes us unique as a planet. And we should be trying to preserve that. But the other thing is that we totally rely on it. The ecosystem services, the things that happen naturally that if those services were gone, we have to pay billions of dollars. I mean, we know it about bees. People are pretty aware, like bees go away, you have to pay for pollination. Some places in China, they're pollinating by hand, literally with, you know, brushes and things. And so I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and I like, it's a very legitimate thing. I think a lot about how does my work in some small way help to try to make the world better and at least as stable as we have it right now. And so making sure that we're preserving and maintaining biodiversity is a really critical thing. The great thing about being in Los Angeles is that we're actually in a biodiversity hotspot. So it's a place that has a really high number of plant species, but we've also lost a lot already. So this is a really important place in the world to protect. Um, and it's also really important to engage people in the process. So, and you know, what I hope is that when I was an intern, almost everybody, I think everybody in my first year of the internship was white, you know, 20 kids. And that's a pretty common thing. But you're seeing more and more kids who are not white getting into these projects and internships and gaining skills and in career paths and rising. And so helping to ensure that that continues and that we're getting new ideas and that people who are most impacted by environmental challenges also have the space to engage in the solutions to it, and just great jobs. Like, you know, I love my job and I want everybody to have the opportunity to go out and do the stuff that I've done, because it's just fantastic. And so I think it's important in a lot of ways. It's important just for, you know, human preservation, biodiversity preservation, and just having a better society.
Totally. So if you were to talk with students who, I mean, it sounds like you're working with young people in your role.
Yeah.
Um, if you were to talk with some of those students who might be interested in pursuing a similar career path or just work in the ecology field, do you have advice that you would give them?
Yeah. So the first piece of advice I always give to younger people is there is a role in conservation for anything. There's a role in conservation for, you know, photography and journalism. There's a role for construction. We have, you know, construction people at the zoo who can build structures where humans and endangered species can live side by side in safety, right? That's something that in the field we need. You know, if we have a restoration program, if we have a recovery program where we're trying to put elephants back in the wild, we need to make sure that as they grow, they're not going to endanger the people. There's basically an application for anything in environmental work. And so the challenge is to figure out, how do I apply it? You know, and to be persistent about trying to apply it. For people who are interested in doing the things that I do, which is like a lot of field work, engaging communities in the field work, studying, you know, behaviors of animals and applying that to conservation, just get good at some things. You don't have to be good at everything, but get good at a few things that you can specialize in. Like I'm okay at statistics. Like, well, now I'm terrible at it, but during grad school, I got okay at statistics. But I'm not a geneticist. I don't do molecular work. You know, I'm okay at botany. I'm okay at, but I'm really good at watching things and finding their poop. And it turns out you can do a whole PhD that's a decent PhD just on that one thing. And so, like, I knew I was good at observing animals. I liked doing it. I enjoyed doing it. And so that's what I pursued in my PhD. And then that turned out to lead to, you know, newer things and lead me to where I am now. Um, and so I'd say the other thing is, as you've figured out what you want to do and you're pursuing the path, be willing to adapt. Like, I never thought I would go to China and work. I never thought that I was going to be doing my PhD in Africa studying monkeys. I didn't think I was going to end up at a zoo, you know, as director of conservation at a zoo, but they've all been wonderful. And it's just because I kind of said yes to the thing that sounded harder than what I was planning to do. And that built the skills, and it built up my, you know, this international network of colleagues, and it led on to the next thing.
It's great advice. Thank you. Yeah. I think that's all of the questions that I had, but is there anything that you feel like you didn't get to talk about that you want to?
Well, I'd say first off, if you go through this and you're like, this end is one too good, I'm happy to do it again. The second thing, anything else it would do? Um, yeah. So one of the things that I learned in undergrad that then I continued to apply in grad school was the value of developing strong relationships with the faculty. So in undergrad, I became close friends with, you know, maybe 5 or 6 professors. And I would go see them in their office hours just to talk. And I would ask them advice, and I would talk about how, you know, they got to wherever they are. And, you know, I would just talk with them and, you know, try to listen more than I spoke. And then that led to my first internship. You know, that led to me deciding that I wanted to be an international field biologist, because literally my professor said, you don't want to be, I was planning at that time to be a teacher, like my parents are both, were both high school teachers. And so I thought I was going to go alternate route and be a high school teacher. And he said, you don't want to be a high school teacher, you want to be an international field biologist. I said, yeah, but how do you do that? And he said, come intern with me. And so I did that, and that led to a job because I worked really hard at that internship. And then that led to the next thing. Um, and then when I went to grad school, I had a lot of faculty that I was close with, and one of those faculty members, Dr. Sue Killam, who unfortunately passed away last year, she and I were very close, and she really supported me, as did my advisor. But my postdoc ended up kind of coming about because of the relationships that I had with her and her connections to Jim Spatilla, who ended up being my advisor for my postdoc. So a lot of it's just relationships, and um, things come out of them. So help, spend the time developing those relationships. It's really worth it in terms of whatever you want to do. If you want to go into, some job afterwards, or if you want to go to grad school, if you want to do international field biology, it's probably going to come because of somebody saying, oh, hey, there's this opportunity and I like you, so I want to be around you. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Um, and it sounds like it's worked out very well for you. So
Yeah, it's been awesome.
um, awesome. Well, to touch on your other point about the interview, I think you did a great job, and my job is to make you look and sound as good as humanly possible. So I'm gonna cut things up, and then any of the photos or videos or whatever you send me will kind of go in there to hide some of those cuts. So
Cool. Yep.
um,
Yeah,
yeah, and
I'll this weekend I'll go through and get some stuff and send it to you.
okay. Yeah, that sounds great. And I'll be sure to send you a cut of the video too before we post it anywhere,
Cool.
just so that you can review it, make sure it sounds good.
Great.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
again for your
Yeah.
time. Have a great weekend.
Nice. You too. Enjoy it. You have a 3 day, or is it two?
No, my partner has a 3 day. How about you?
Yeah, we have three. It's nice. But I also have to come in on Sunday. I started relationship. There's outdoor Afro, which is you know outdoor Afro?
No, but it
It's a
sounds
group out here to get Black community members out hiking, and then they also we started before hours tour with them and the Black Burgers of LA, another just affinity group club. I read an article in LA Times about them, and well, actually my director did, and she sent it to me, and I contacted them, and so they came out in December, and we did a tour, and it was really great. And so we're gonna do one on Sunday again, and then start like a regular, kind of relationship with them, because it's just really, really great. So
sounds awesome.
yeah, so I'll be here on Sunday, but it'll be fun.
Yeah,
And then, but I have a 3 day, yeah. So
awesome.
yeah,
Well, enjoy the weekend and
too. Nice talking to you.
yeah, you too. I'll be in touch.
Thanks. Bye.